My fiancé 24I26 liked to host parties at our house for all of our friends. We met at a party 3 years before we got engaged. For the most part, we had same-gender friends to avoid temptation. There was one time my fiancé became friends with a man and he turned it into something flirtatious. So she told me right away and stopped communicating with him. That's the proper way to handle someone coming onto you when you're engaged to be married. So she built trust with me more than once, which is why what she did came as such a shock to me. I'll admit that during the week before this party we had, I was focusing a lot on my writing jobs. It involved a lot of focus on my computer without interruption. So when the night of the party came, I promised her I wouldn't work so we could have a good time. Well, we mingled together for some time. But one of my friends started behaving really weirdly. I became concerned for him and started paying extra attention to him. He told me something about the medicine he took along with drinking alcohol. He started twitching and struggling to breathe. I decided to call an ambulance for him. He groggily asked me to go to the hospital with him because he was scared. So I did. I texted my fiancé's phone to let her know what was going on. I didn't get a reply. It was 3 a.m. By the time I returned home, my friend was staying in the hospital overnight. I walked upstairs half asleep and didn't find my fiancé in our bedroom. I went to the guest room and found the door locked. I started knocking on the door loudly, asking for my fiancé. She opened the door half asleep wearing only a blanket. My childhood best friend was half asleep on the bed, only covered by a sheet. I could see fear setting in both of their faces. I asked her what the hell they were doing and she started crying saying it was my fault for leaving them alone while they drank. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I asked if they had sex even though it was pretty obvious they did. And both of them tried to play dumb like they couldn't remember. I was in the middle of asking my fiancé to come with me when she suddenly bolted to the bathroom. I tried to come in but she locked the door. She was clean up. I looked at the man who used to be my best friend and asked him on a real personal level. If he had slept with my woman, he was instantly defeated and looked at the floor. He couldn't say anything except that he was really sorry. And he drank a lot as he got dressed. He said he hoped I could forgive him someday and left my house. My fiancé came out and said we should just forget this entire night. She didn't remember what happened. So how could I hold it against her? That was her logic. But I disagreed. We drank and partied together so much in the past. So I knew the only reason she did this tonight was that she thought she could get away with it. It was the only time I wasn't around while she drank and she took advantage of it. I told her how I was seeing things and asked her to leave. She couldn't believe it. She really didn't think that one night of drinking and sleeping with my best friend would be the end of our 5-year relationship. I told her I couldn't trust her anymore. And even if she never cheated on me again, the fact that she did would chip away at my self-esteem and sanity. She begged and cried for 3 hours while she slowly packed. At some point, she was just laying on the floor dry heaving and crying. I couldn't stand to see her like that for too long. So I went downstairs a few times to clean up the party mess when she stopped packing for too long. I told her I was going to call her dad to come help. She was mortified. She begged me not to and started packing faster. But I asked her who she wanted me to call to arrange a place for her to stay. She just started sobbing and inaudibly told me she didn't have anywhere else to go. So I called her dad. She was even more upset when he got there and started to blame me for the breakup. She couldn't admit fault to her dad because she didn't want him to be disappointed in her. He sort of got the idea of what happened for me, but I didn't tell him anything, just that we couldn't be together anymore. She was extremely embarrassed and depressed that her father was helping her pack up her stuff from her house with the party mess still all over the house. The reality of what she did the night before was stuck in her head, tormenting her. I could see it on her face. She knew I went to support my friend in the hospital and she slept with my best friend during that time. You can't really recover from that. She wanted so badly to leave a lot of her stuff there. But I insisted they take it all and even started loading her dad's truck with them. He got the idea that I didn't want her to ever have a reason to come back here. The three of us got all of her stuff in the truck. Her phone was laying on the kitchen counter and I saw a text from my best friend. It said he enjoyed what they did but couldn't forgive himself for it and thought it would be easier if they didn't see each other again. That must have been pretty devastating for her to hear on top of what was happening. But I was secretly glad she didn't have an AP to run to, for comfort during the consequences of her actions. I didn't have anyone either. So it was only fair. I went to visit my friend in the hospital and he was much better. I took him home and stayed with him for a while because I didn't want to go back to my place. That's when I met his sister for the first time. She was visiting family, but usually lived in her own place and worked a respectable job. I fell for her instantly. Even though it was the same day as my breakup, I developed a friendship with her for a while until I couldn't stand it anymore and asked her out. She said yes. And I had already forgotten about the betrayal. My ex dealt me. Speaking of my ex, she had to start a really crappy part-time job while living at her father's because he wouldn't let her mope around the house all day. She had no idea what she was doing with her life and started to question who she even was. I'm pretty sure she needed to go through this harsh reality check in order to grow and learn from her mistake. I didn't do anything wrong in this situation, but I learned how to cope with heartbreak properly. I think I lucked out by finding another dating prospect so soon. But I'm using self-control and independence in this process. Just because I was used to living with my partner does not mean I'm going to move in too quickly with my new girlfriend. Wow, you've been through a terrible experience there. You were being a caring and considerate friend in the midst of what was supposed to be a fun night, and you chose to get him help and go with him to the hospital. That is so respectable and kind. Exactly what you should have done in this situation. You depended on your fiancé to be reasonable and considerate just like you were. But instead she chose to get drunk and sleep with your best friend. I'm disappointed in him as well, but the responsibility falls on her shoulders. In order for a relationship to blossom, there has to be open communication and neither person should get a big head. Always look out for each other more than yourself, because if you have a genuine partner, you'll never go without. I'm glad you found a responsible and promising woman to date. You've got a good head on your shoulders and you know that letting a new relationship become serious too fast isn't the way to go. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you all the best. Now, let's get into today's second story. My wife 26 I 30 were together for 6 years before she decided to start taking a pottery class. She had always been really artistic, but due to life's harsh circumstances, she never got the chance to pursue or develop this side of her. We were finally at a place financially where she could do it. I was so happy for her. My hobby consisted of playing my keyboard and writing almost songs. She started bringing home little pottery objects she made, and at first it was great for our relationship. Then she started behaving differently. She started quickly closing browsers whenever I came close to the computer screen. She was also really protective of her flip phone and occasionally took longer to get home from her pottery class. I waited until she was asleep one night before I searched her computer history. There was nothing odd except for an email she kept logging into that. I didn't recognize. I installed a keylogger onto the computer and found out the password to the email account along with all the emails she kept in the draft folder. They were actually back-and-forth conversations with someone else that was logging into the account. She probably thought she was being clever by never pressing send. All the emails were signed Professor P and they mentioned the pottery class a few times. I printed out all the emails between them and found the really intimate ones. According to their conversation, they actually had sex on the professor's desk in the classroom. Whether it was just a fantasy or it really happened, I knew for sure. My wife was, at the very least, having an emotional affair. Possibly with the professor of her pottery class. I was furious. I couldn't even make myself a microwavable meal without shaking and talking out loud to myself after I ate it angrily. I printed out all their emails. I had the dates and times each draft was saved. Some of the messages even mentioned times they spent together behind my back and plans to call each other. I was appalled. I encouraged my wife to take this class because I loved her and wanted her to be happy because of my caring nature. She found another man to sleep with. It hurt so bad and felt completely unfair. As soon as she got home, I couldn't control myself. I blew up on her. I asked her about emails in a draft folder on her computer and she went pale. She tried to say those were old messages from when she was in college. But I told her I had proof they weren't old. She didn't move a muscle until I came back with the printed pages. I slapped them down on the table and asked her what the hell was wrong with her. She didn't say anything. I asked her who Professor P was and she remained silent. She looked extremely guilty. So her silence was not reassuring. I told her it was over. She was caught. So she might as well tell me all about it. She started crying and pleading with me to have mercy on her and our relationship if she came clean about it. I said I would because I would have said anything at this point to hear the truth come out of her. She said it was her professor from the pottery class. I asked how old he was and she said 42. So that meant he was 18 years older than her. I freaked out. I asked her if they had sex like their emails said they did and she said no at first, saying it was just something he wanted to happen. But I could tell she wasn't being honest. I'd been with her for more than 6 years. So I knew what her face looked like when she was lying. I asked her again and told her she might as well get it out now so we could move on properly. She admitted to it. Apparently they had sex lots of times before and after class. He was married and hated his wife at this point, but couldn't leave her because she ruined his career and life with a child support order. She said she felt bad for him and no one deserved to be forced to live a life without love. I told her we were done. I said she was not the only fish in the sea for the sky. And if he was going to cheat on his wife, it didn't have to be with her. I thought we were happily married with a wonderful future ahead of us. She proved me wrong. She was sobbing with a super red face and tears streaming down her face. As she told me she was happily married. She said she made the biggest mistake of her life and wouldn't be able to live with herself if I didn't stay with her. I told her that was her problem. Now I had been a good husband to her, looking out for her and making sure she was happy, and it wasn't my fault. She committed adultery. I said I wouldn't be made into a fool's puppet. I had to remain in control of my life. And if I stayed with her for this, I wouldn't be able to stand on my own 2 feet. Whether she admitted it or not, she wouldn't look at me the same. I wouldn't be as much a man to her because I let her sleep with another man. She texted her sister to come over and try to talk to me. But once I told her everything that happened and showed her the printed evidence, she couldn't defend herself. She told her she needed to start packing and come stay with her for a while. My wife let out a wail of defeat. Like this was the end of her life. I asked her sister to tell her that this wasn't the end. Just a new beginning. She had to learn from this mistake, not bury it deep or try to cover it up with a new relationship. She had to look herself in the mirror and ask her heart why she did it. Her sister did pass along these messages. And as far as I know, she's still single and working on herself. She calls me all the time, but I don't answer. I'm glad she's working on herself. But isn't for me? I've started dedicating more time to myself and hobbies. I never took the time to develop before. I have full songs written now. So I'll be able to woo my next girlfriend without a problem. You caught your sneaky wife. As soon as her behavior started changing, there are lots of ways to catch a cheating spouse, but I love the key logging method. You only confronted her after you had evidence. So it was much harder for her to deny it. Don't blame yourself for her infidelity. Her mistake had nothing to do with you, and she's paying the price for her actions. Guilt and consequences are bitter pills for a cheater to swallow. Now, she knows that having sympathy for a struggling man isn't enough of a reason to break her own promises to her spouse. I have faith that you'll be able to find. And a good quality woman would have the opportunity to become independent and provide for herself. A woman who knows what she wants and won't subject herself to anything stupid that would destroy a good relationship. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck in the future. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened.